Welcome to Creating a Life in Music. My name is Mike Salo. I'm a guitarist and music educator from Minneapolis, Minnesota in the U.S., and I want to know how other musicians make their living, how they got there, how they sustain it, and most importantly, the insights and tips they may have for the rest of us. I interview musicians from all over the world, from various parts of the music industry, to break down the question, how do I do music full time? So join me as we discover the many different ways to create a life in music. If you're a guitar player who's ever wanted to attend music college but couldn't because it's too expensive or too far away, or maybe you're just beyond that point in your life and you're just too busy with your own family and your own career to commit to something like that, I would highly recommend going and checking out fretboardbiology.com. At only $29 a month, Fretboard Biology takes out all the guesswork, putting the right things in the right order. It's highly structured, highly organized, college-level guitar program designed by one of the top guitar educators on the planet, Joe Elliott. Joe was head of the guitar department at McNally Smith for a number of years, where he designed the entire guitar curriculum, as well as being head over at Musicians Institute in Hollywood for many, many years. He knows what you need to know. And you can get 50% off your first month when you go to fretboardbiology.com/register-salo, my last name, that's S-A-L-O-W. So fretboardbiology.com/register-salo. But yeah, man, I appreciate you hit me up. I think we have some mutual friends in the space. I have a lot of drummer friends and acquaintances.
Word, yeah,
know
I'm sure
you
it's
or
quite
know
possible.
of you. yeah, because immediately when you hit me up, I hit my buddy Charlie Engen, and I was like, hey, you know JP? Like, he just hit me up to do the podcast. I was like, I've been following his stuff for a while. I don't know if you guys know each other, but they're both Twin Cities guys who are doing some cool stuff.
Super familiar name. I might need to see a face to connect the dots, but yeah.
Yeah, he plays drums for Scale the Summit and Five Finger Death Punch.
Oh, word. Great. Nice.
So I didn't know if you guys had talked in the past before, because you guys have been doing the online stuff, among other things, of course, probably starting around the same time. And I know there's a pretty strong drum community, so I didn't know if you guys were in touch at all. I think, are you a Meinl guy at all, or?
Yeah. Is he?
Yeah,
too?
I think. Yeah, you guys both are Meinl dudes.
Oh, that's funny. Because, yeah, you'll find progressively more here very quickly that I live kind of under a rock.
Okay.
I usually don't know what's going on and who you're talking about.
Okay, fair enough. So, tell me about yourself then. So I had heard of you a while back because of course, my dogs start barking immediately when we start the podcast. They hear me down here talking, that's why.
Nice.
So I had heard about you quite some time ago, I think, because during the McNally days, there was always, because I think you probably were at Berkeley around the same time I was at McNally Smith College of Music. Are you familiar with McNally? Probably, yeah.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, being from the Twin Cities, because you are, right? You're correct.
Yeah, I'm from Lakeville, suburb down south a little bit.
Yeah, I know Lakeville. Yep. So, but anyway, so I've been aware of your playing for about that long, probably like 10 years, maybe more. When the hell was I at McNally? So more than 10 years. Because I think at some point you might have come through with a band that you had that was with the Berkeley students, and then it was like Berkeley students playing with McNally students at maybe like Caboose or something.
That sounds perfectly right. I think it was with Dave McKay Group. I wish I remembered. Do you remember who was the Minneapolis band? My memory's bad with this kind of thing.
Oh gosh, I have no.
That was
clue.
Dave McKay Group, probably around circa 2013, 12.
Maybe, yeah, 12, maybe. I don't really remember. Like somewhere between like 10 and 13, I think. I don't really remember at all. I don't even know who was playing. I don't know, maybe like. They would have gone by PB and the Jam at that moment.
Yes,
I don't know
yes.
Was it them? Okay.
That's definitely it. That was a fun night. This is slowly coming back to me, and I remember it being a very good night. And also the Higgins brothers. You know the Higgins brothers, Rob and Mike?
Oh, I'm familiar with that name.
With Bryce. Bryce plays drums.
Okay.
What was the band name? The band name was Bryce Plays Drums. They might have been either on that bill, or we just played separate shows with them. Anyways, I'm enjoying a little nostalgia right now. This is great.
Yeah. Totally. There's the connection. And they're now called New Sound Underground, the
Right.
E and the Jam, New Sound Underground,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
crush. They have some really cool cool people in the band. Actually, I think they have a Berkeley alum in there, Ryan Butler, got his bachelor's, bass player. I'm not sure if you knew him at all, but
The name's familiar. Yeah.
yeah, but I'm this type of guy who like, oh, you are in any vicinity of this thing, you might know that person.
Totally. You got it. You might as well go for it, you know?
But yeah, so tell me about kind of your background and how. So I'm curious about your musical upbringing and how you ended up at Berkeley, and why ultimately that became kind of a big decision in your, I guess, trajectory. As people could probably just heard, I think there's always that question of like, oh, there was a music school in the town you lived in. Why go to Berkeley over that school? I know why. Berkeley is a superior school, but still, it's always good to hear like the actual story, from the person.
Yeah, totally. I mean, going to Berkeley is the first major turning point in my life of I'd say a handful of extremely important ones. As far as the decision, like leading up to it, I was playing as much as I could in living in the suburbs. I really never was like in the scene in Minneapolis. I was still 17 years old. There wasn't a lot I could do in the city at that age, and I also just like whatever I could have possibly done, I wasn't plugged into it. So I had my own band that was like a jazz fusion group. I was doing actually a lot of big band stuff. I was in a couple big bands and subbing for a couple big bands, and I was like starting to sub for some bigger, better big bands, and that was really fun. Did some community band stuff, the school stuff. So I was just playing as much as I could. Did the Minnesota Jazz Orchestra or Minnesota Jazz Youth Orchestra or whatever it's called in like the B-level band. And anyways, so time to go to college, and I had some other interests, right? And like I was thinking about graphic design was something I was into, and architecture was something I was into. So I toured a couple schools, and really my mom at a certain point she's a musician. Was always not professional. Well, was professional at younger, but like now always involved in the church music stuff and plays a ton. And she was like, if you don't do this, you're gonna always kind of you're gonna wonder what would have happened if you would have scratched that itch. So I think you should give it a go, right? And I had gotten some scholarship that made it at least able to be reasonably considered. We never from the beginning talked about like just go for 2 years, like don't do the whole thing, save half the money. But that's what ended up happening, and that's a good strategy. But anyways, basically, like if we can extract a nugget of wisdom from my mother here, it was that it whether it's go to Berkeley and empty the bank, or just like taking that first big leap wherever it might be. Even if it's the music school in town, if you're like, I don't know, it's like, for me, I always kind of operate by this rule of if I keep having the thought, if the itch is still there for months and even years, I kind of just have to scratch it to put it to rest and know that even if I don't end up thriving there, or I'm like, okay, this was the wrong move, then I know and I can move on more peacefully with my life. So that was important for her to say. And in my case, it ended up being the perfect thing for me. But yeah. And then really I had only applied to 2 music schools. I remember thinking about McNally and looking at other schools very randomly. I mean, you're a teenager, you're not thinking that hard or clearly about things. At least I wasn't. I applied to Eau Claire, Wisconsin, which is where my drum teacher went, Jason Price. Didn't get in. Totally humiliating audition experience. I was so unprepared to like sight read music. They wanted me to do like real musician stuff. But I got into Berkeley with the scholarship, and so went that route. And my parents were encouraging, and that was the first turning point. And we can talk about why and how, but let me pause there so I don't talk ad nauseum here.
Oh no, that's why we're here, to hear you talk as much as possible. And I'm not trying to be sarcastic at all. That's literally exactly why.
That's great.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. You brought up Eau Claire. I had some friends who went there. For people who don't know, I think that's around here. It's seen as kind of like a pretty decent like jazz program.
Mm-hmm.
From my understanding, I think it's one of those schools that if you got into, it'd be a pretty big deal as far as music goes. But I don't know what your opinions are on that, because it's, I've argued this with other people, and we obviously have, we have many examples of this, but it's more the person than it is the school that they're attending as far as the outcome goes. I don't know if you've seen that, and I'm saying that more for people listening, because really, if you're after it and you're going after it in the way you would like to, you're likely going to make something happen. And the one thing I will say about like Berkeley McNally is that there's a whole different, and I don't know what you think about this, a whole different environment that really helps people to thrive in certain contexts and work together. It's all music everywhere all the time, as opposed to like, at Eau Claire, it could have been, there's kids that that would be doing this degree and that degree. And so I don't know if you have a similar opinion as far as the education realm, how much Berkeley shaped you, as opposed to you think maybe how, like, what if you did get into Eau Claire, like how much different of a shaping do you think that would have had on you?
Yeah, I mean, the butterfly effect is real here. So I think you're absolutely right that the school can't just by dint of being a good school churn out a great musician, even a good musician, a career musician. It really can't do it for you in any regard. So there's like a major selection bias in fancy schools, because way more people apply, and they can be more selective. And if they have a high level, then high level students are applying. So it's actually kind of hard to know like how much the school matters versus the fact that they just were able to accept like a really high level crop of students. The thing that differs a lot, I think, and I haven't thought about this before, but going to music school, it becomes really normal, like it becomes the water to you as the fish, that everyone is thinking about music constantly. Like what you just said is what places in my mind that like you have, if you're at a sort of more regular university where like you're in the music department, but you're sort of more mixed with other people, people are doing different things, and your idea of what life is supposed to be and what your future might look like would maybe be more similar to the traditional path in a way. Whereas at Berkeley, I never met a traditional path type of person who had any notion of like, I'm going to graduate and get a normal job and have a family. Like most of my friends that I grew up with in the suburbs took a more traditional route. And so by the time we were 25, like everyone was having kids and had a house and was married and stuff. So this was not anywhere on near anyone I knew's like radar when I was 25, because I was in the music community, and that requires a longer sort of period of figuring things out and accumulating experience before you like really get a foothold. So now that I'm 32, starting to see like, okay, now a lot of people are getting married, and like some very few people are having kids, and like a couple people have houses, right? So it's a bit of a different trajectory from the beginning, and being at Berkeley really immerses you in this idea that it's totally okay to be completely obsessed and just thinking about this. And it didn't register to me as a thing that I had recognized or realized. It just was the sort of water I was swimming in. And now when I look back, I can see what an enormous influence that had on me, because like everyone, I'm certainly amenable to the goals of the people around me and the viewpoints, goals of life or whatever for the people that are around me. So I was surrounded by people who had left their hometowns and countries to commit their lives to music. And that was a very different thing. I mean, I lived in Boston for 3 years and literally don't know a single person from Boston, right? So it was at school with only people who had left town to start over and just immerse themselves fully in the art. And of course, I didn't think about it quite so poetically at the time, but that's what was going on. And that's unique.
Yeah,
but
totally.
To extract another lesson, like I always like to think about what are the levels. Like Berkeley is an extreme example, like I just described. Everyone leaves their home country and comes and does this at a fairly high level. What's the level that matters if you're looking to make that next step or set yourself up with some sort of advantage, or expose yourself to an environment where it's more normal to take the music career path as opposed to a more traditional career path. And as anyone will tell you, the biggest, usually the biggest advantage of going to an art school is the network that you build, right? So a lot of my best friends are from Berkeley. A lot of the gigs that I've gotten are from Berkeley, even sort of vicariously through a connection of a connection. The connection will be a friend from Berkeley or someone I knew there or whatever. So that sort of network effect is really real. And the question to ask, right? The question is not, and I teach a lot of students, and sure, like every now and then someone wants to go to Berkeley, but that's not usually the case. The question is where are those pockets? Where are those communities that are accessible to me, or that I could make a big step and jump into? What's the realistic level where I can sort of try to get as much of that as possible, right? Because it's about being around people who are taking it seriously and people who are driven and want to do stuff. That might be, a small version of this is like going to the weekly jam down the way, right? Or people who are committing a few hours of their week at least to doing this seriously, or whatever it is, like seeking out those opportunities for this or that band, putting yourself in as a sub. Even for like, when I think about like community theater stuff I did back in Minnesota, I didn't stay in Minnesota, so those networks didn't exactly end up paying off. But like the seeds were being sown for a future music career in Minnesota. And like the big band stuff, I was seeing spread. I was seeing like, aha, I'm in these 3 bands, and like now this guy that knows the old drummer from this band, they need a sub in this better band. And like, sure, it's a long free gig that doesn't pay, but I'm going to do it because now I've kind of got my foot in the door. So
yeah,
really it's like showing up for whatever opportunities you can where there's those types of people.
If you're a guitar player or bass player, you should really have a copy of Guitar Pro tablature software. I've been using Guitar Pro for like 15 years, and I really can't live without it. At this point, it's sort of an industry standard within the guitar education realm, and it's really easy to use. You can make all your licks and write out all your songs, and you can actually use it in conjunction with ultimateguitar.com, where you can download Guitar Pro files and learn all your favorite songs. So I couldn't recommend this software enough. And if you use the code MikeGP at checkout, you can get 10% off your copy of Guitar Pro 8. That's Mike, M-I-K-E-G-P at checkout, guitar-pro.com.
Is pretty big.
Yeah, I think that's the reason why people, migrate towards, Nashville, New York, LA. They migrate to these places because they know, stuff's happening there. It's sort of connected, but completely different industry. But I just watched the Schwarzenegger documentary yesterday, and he talks about like, I had to go where the thing I wanted to do was happening, and it wasn't happening in my little hometown of Austria. So he first went to Germany, and then he went to like South Africa, and then he finally made it to LA, and he was like, this is where it's happening. This is where what I'm doing is being done the best, and I want to be surrounded by it. And that was, of course, when he was bodybuilding. But I was watching that, and I was like, wow, this really resonates with musicians. Like I was like, because it's essentially the same thing. It's like not everyone is doing this thing, and sure, it's happening probably all over. But where is it happening in the way that you want to be doing it? And I think gravitating that way. So music college is a great start because we've all heard all the stories, I think, of all the legends who have gone to Berkeley, for example. And that's a good indication, I think, for young people to go like, oh, I think there's a lot of validity in so-and-so went there. Maybe I should go there. Because that obviously had some impact on their life, and maybe it's a good stepping stone at first, at the least. But totally.
Yeah. And there's also, again, always be thinking of, right, okay, you can define the ideal. People get really hung up on the ideal. I can't afford the ideal. 4 years at music college? Are you kidding me? I can't either. It doesn't matter. The question is, what's the ideal? And then you like downscale to the highest level you can do, right? So let's say you're a teenager and you're really serious about this. Take it from me, like 4 years at Berkeley, if you're going to try to perform is mostly a waste of money, right? So you make 80% of the connections in the first year or two. So you could go for one semester. I actually have a student that just planned from the beginning, I'm going for 1 year to Berkeley, and then moved on. And that's I went for 2.5 years, and honestly got 80% of the connections and education and improvements in my playing and stuff in the first year and a half, I'd say. So I was exposed to that. I'm in the network. I'm in the city where the people are, and then I can just drop out and like be with all those people doing all the same projects and not paying $40,000 a year. So there's that, and there's a step down from that, right? Okay, I can't even afford 1 year at Berkeley. That's fine. You can just live nearby, right, and be a musician, go to all the jams. Like, I don't remember ever caring that someone did or didn't go to Berkeley, right? Especially, you'd be with people from other schools or whatever it is. So it's like a step down from that is like being near those places so that you can just kind of fraternize with people. And sometimes you'd meet people who, their bass player in their band isn't from any of these schools. He's just a local guy or something. And it's like, cool, that was a random cool thing. And now it's even more like that, because now I'm in New York and I'm like playing more around town, and everyone's backstory is totally different. Some people went to some random ass college. Some people just moved to the city and made it happen. Some people have like whatever fancy music school behind them. But like you said in the beginning, the music school isn't going to make you great. It's going to provide a network and some fertile ground. But yeah, I think sort of reverse engineering the ideal is a useful exercise for figuring out what could I do now to take some effective steps.
Yeah, and when you really think about it too, there's really one job. And maybe I'm wrong here. If you have any to chime in, please. One job that requires a musician to have a degree, and that would be to teach at an institution, like a school. And that's the only one I can think about that requires the degree. Am I missing anything with that? No, I don't think so.
Not really. And even that, there's
really
some wiggle room. There's some wiggle room with even that. But yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. And there is wiggle room, and I've experienced it. But that's really the only thing. Or if you want to get a master's and doctorate and do the whole thing. I did some similar thing. I actually transferred in to McNally after I got some community college credits, and I just did it in 3 years.
Another brilliant idea. Absolutely. Yep. Or do a diploma program.
Yeah.
Do a diploma. No one cares. Like, skip all the liberal arts.
Yeah.
No English class, no history class, just music class. Takes about 2 years. Costs half the price. Oh gosh. Boom.
Dude, there's a whole conversation we had there about having to take math and English in college. When I still look back at that, like, why did I have to do that? That was such a waste of credits. Anyway, I was going to ask you about this kind of a little bit of a left turn, but still music. So I'm curious about how old were you when you did the drum off?
It was the finals were in 2012, so I was 22.
Were you at Berkeley, or were you still in Minnesota?
I had dropped out of Berkeley to practice more for the drum off.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, go on.
Did you, do you won that year? Did you?
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I thought. So I would like to know about the impact that had or didn't have, or just the whole story behind, if that had any sort of, impact on your career, and what type of impact that had.
Absolutely. There are many lessons to extract from the drum off experience. That absolutely was so Berkeley is the first big turning point. Winning the drum off, definitely the second big turning point in my life. And there are two different spheres in my life. One is the real music industry, where people play music in real life. And the other one is the online drum community / education world. And people find it very hard to believe how little overlap there is between these. Right? So people who know me as a drummer online and see that I have a lot of followers, they go, wow, people must just hoard you when you go to the jazz club in New York. And I'm like, no, you really have to take my word for it. No one knows who I am here. And I'm absolutely nowhere near a big deal. So these are two very different things. Everything on the online drumming side of my life sparked from the drum off. And so first bit of the story is I was thinking about, I don't know if I was obsessed with the drum off. I'd done it 5 years before. Well, actually, I was quite casual about it. But by the time I had actually gotten to like the third round, which I'd never gotten to before. I was in Berkeley, it was Boston. And I was kind of like, wow, you know what? For the first time in my life, I actually might have the equipment to win this. There's no reason. I didn't have like any excuse. I was like, I can't win this. So it was the first time in my life I kind of had a light bulb moment. I was like, this is actually a possibility. And there was a turning point there where I became sort of obsessed with practicing for it and preparing. And I happened to be practicing things that I thought were really unique and really cool that I'd never seen in the drum off. One of them was clave, left foot clave stuff, and particularly a 7/8 clave, and gaining freedom over that. Another one was like I had just been exposed to 5/16 as a time signature or an idea, and really now I would think about it as quintuplets in 4/4. But my teacher, Casey Sherrill, had exposed that to me just kind of like for fun on a whim. He's like, check this out. This is kind of cool, right? And I was digging into that, and I was like, you know what? This might be new, exciting stuff for the contest. And I think my technical chops are at least somewhere near where they need to be. So I started practicing all the time, and I started like not really wanting to do school. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to continue doing school anyways, because I was doing a degree called professional music, which means mix and match your degree. So I was taking just random classes that I thought would be cool. I didn't really have a long-term plan for it. But at this point, I had done a lot of the classes I wanted to do, and you start to specialize. After 2 years, you start to like, okay, you've defined a major, and now you're going to specialize in whatever the thing is. And I didn't want to specialize. I just wanted to play the drums and have a good time and sort of learn a lot of different things. So I was thinking like, maybe I'm not going to continue. So the drum off, I withdrew from the 5th semester like 2 weeks before it was done, because I wasn't going to do the gigantic arranging projects that were going to take dozens and dozens of hours that I could instead practice for the drum off for. So now I was going to the regional round, which is the 4th of 5 rounds, super practicing all the time for it. And I got through to the finals, and I was like, okay, now it's time to just give it everything I got. And that's when I moved back to Minnesota, lived in my parents' basement, and practiced literally all day for like the month and a half leading up to it. And I was also doing the Roland V drums contest. I had won the national one that year, and so there was an international round. So in January, a week apart from the drum off, the Guitar Center drum off national level was the international Roland V drums contest. And I was trying to prepare both these totally different solos at the same time. So I had a cool Neil Peart kit going on, where I had the acoustic kit on one side, and I'd flip around when it got too late and I was disturbing the neighbors, and I'd play on the electric kit. Same octopad. Octopad stayed put. Anyways, it was fun. But the point here is like, I went all in on this, and even if I wouldn't have won, I wouldn't have regretted going all in on it. It wouldn't have been a waste of time, because I got so much better at the drums. I pushed myself so hard, and it forced me to make important life decisions about school. Right? I was like, this is a turning point. This seems to be worth more to me, of higher value than the stuff that I'm doing in school. And that's saying something about this moment that wouldn't have applied in my first semester, right? My first semester at Berkeley, there's nothing that would have usurped the value of being in the school. So you start to see the declining returns on school, start to see the increasing returns on real life. So anyways, practiced hard and prepared super hard and won the drum off. And I would never dare to think that I deserved to win the drum off. The other drummers in it, I actually think, were superior drummers to me. They could do better, more impressive things, and on a gig, they'd probably sound better. But I can tell you that I prepared probably literally 100 times harder. So when I got to the drum off, I was kind of amazed to see people still talking about what they were going to do in the solo. Like 3 days before the contest, they'd be like, yeah, I think I'm going to do this kind of thing. And I was like, wow, I've had this shit set for like months and have been just like drilling it hard. So I don't know if that helped or not. And I think part of why I won was actually the fact that I saw it more as a composition than as a drum solo thing. So it was more of a song. Anyways, all that aside, to actually get to your question, won the drum off, and then, there's like a huge spike in attention, right? I'd never been paid attention to by more than 10 people at a time. And now, hundreds of thousands of people slowly were watching this video of me. And the big trick here, and sort of the lesson to extract, if there is one, is that there's really not usually in life like one big opportunity that makes everything happen. And that's not even the case for me. The drum off was a big one, but most drum off winners you can't name, right? It's very easy to just kind of like fade into obscurity again after a big win of something. So the first lesson is sort of when you do get a lucky break, and ideally you just, as you're working and putting yourself out there, you get some lucky breaks in life. The goal is to make the most of it, every chance you get. So in this case, I had hundreds of thousands of people suddenly going, oh, who's this guy? Check it out. And I needed to provide some value to continue to attract their attention, right? So to actually start to build my first fans or followers or whatever, people who are interested in what I was doing. So right away, I started blogging. I started putting videos out, performances out, practice clips. This was kind of like, not early YouTube, but it wasn't what it is today. And it was pre-Instagram and TikTok and all that stuff. So, it was kind of just sloppy, half decent videos that I'd throw out, but it was something for people to pay attention to. And I was really invested in being super open and authentic and not putting on a facade and showing people what the process looks like. And also by some wonderful act of God here, some serious luck, I had started video blogging the day before I left for the drum off. And I was like, you know what? I'm curious what happens between being a nobody and being a somebody. This might be something that contributes to that. So I have this great, it's cringeworthy to me because I was a child at the time, but like this documentation of me leading up to preparing for going to winning the drum off and then everything that builds after that. And I've continued doing that blog. But anyway, so I'm trying to capitalize on people's attention at the time. And a year later to the date, I launched my website, jpbouvetmethod.com. At the time, it was jpbouvetmusic.com, which was a teaching website. And I had wanted to do that. I had actually designed it, I think, beforehand. But that was the time to launch. And again, now that video, let's say at the end of a year, that video had a couple 100,000 views. And most of those people are never going to think about me again. And maybe 1 out of 1,000 or 1 out of 10,000 became, say 1 out of 1,000 kept following me. And 1 out of 10,000 was interested enough in what I was doing that they would pay money to subscribe to my website. So that was kind of the catch. And I started to make this tiny little bit of money doing that. And it became clear that like I had this little family of fans that it was now not only prudent, but also really rewarding and fun to nourish. So that meant trying to keep doing what I'm doing and just opening the window. I always saw it at that point in my life with the early blogging days, is I'm just opening the window. I'm trying to figure out the music thing. And I want you to tag along and see how it's going, for better or for worse. It's interesting because a lot of the projects that I cover in early blogs don't exist anymore. And I guess there's a lesson in that in itself, that like those bands aren't around, those gigs aren't happening. But I had to do those gigs to sort of like build skills, build experience, meet the right people, and just outlast other drummers, which is a whole other question mark. But anyways, so a lot of my drum world stuff comes back to the drum off. Most people in the music world have no idea what the drum off is or that I want it ever. And they don't need to know, and I don't talk about it. Distant memory at this point. I, from that moment, was trying to outlive the idea of being the drum off winner.
I'm sorry I brought it back.
No. It's good. Especially in a podcast like this, it's so hyper relevant. So how's that? I think we're leaving now. We've won the drum off. We're trying to make something of the attention, and those are the seeds that I'm still are still a big part of my living today.
One of the best things you can do as a musician is to protect your own hearing. I've been using these Eargasm high-fidelity earplugs for months now, and I really love them. They're nice and discreet, high quality, and they don't make any of the sound muffled. They let in the right frequencies that I need on gigs or at shows. You can get 10% off your order if you use code MSALO10 at checkout. That's my first initial M, my last name Salo, S-A-L-O-W, 10 at checkout to get 10% off your order at eargasm.com.
You brought up a really good point within the how did you word it? But I'll just word it a different way. I guess I can't think of what you said. When you have an opportunity or when something happens, trying to sort of ride that wave and keep the attention there in a sense. And I've seen people do both things. I've seen people really do a bad job of that, and I've seen people do a very good job of that. And you can tell people who've done a really good job of it because you can see the growth, right? And that's interesting because I mean I remember hearing someone I saw that it can be very intimidating. And I want to know your thoughts about this because when that stuff starts to happen, for me and for friends I've talked to, it becomes, I don't want to say panic mode, but it becomes this like, oh shit, like I got to really get some stuff together and like start making things happen and start doing, and like, oh God, I got to do like this. I got to make that. I got to make that. And I think that's a really valuable lesson in the sense of like, yeah, when you do have an opportunity, when you do have like a big win, whether it's a literal win or just a lot of success happening, knowing that like the work has just begun is kind of important, I think, for people to understand in that context. Once you have that big moment, if you want to continue to do the thing, there's, for lack of a better term, there's got to be something there for those fans to grab, to whether it's a subscription or like you have lessons available, like, oh, you can take lessons with me. Here's how to sign up or what have you. I think it's an important thing for people to know because I have seen lots of people who essentially maybe build up a social media presence, but really don't offer anything. And then by the time they do, there's been a little bit of die down in the hype. And then they're like, why aren't people, wanting this thing that I made? And it's like, just, give it time. And you also made a good point with the 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000, because that is a very real thing. And I've talked to a lot of people that are like, oh yeah, like it doesn't matter of these followers or these views. That's not necessarily the fan base, the true fan base. And I'm not saying that it's differs from people to people. Like there's definitely people I think who have quote unquote more engagement, I guess, for lack of a better term. And you can see that online in the online space. And I think it's important going in as someone new to it to realize 80,000 followers doesn't mean 80,000 fans. It just means 80,000 people click the button, and it's very cool. And it's very nice to be able to think like, okay, I have that reach. But even with all the other aspects and everything, it's very hard to reach that. So what you're really going for is, trying to find, and that's the subscription thing is a great idea too. Trying to find those super fans, those people who really want the thing that you're doing and are really excited about it.
Yeah, and they come and they go because you have to keep in mind, thinking about your own experience as a fan of someone or something, it becomes a part of your life for a while. So it's kind of an important thing. But really, when we're thinking about this, like these lucky breaks, it's important to realize, again, it's never one big break that you capitalize on, or almost never. Right. So the thing is, I think the shift in perspective that's useful here is this is your job. So show up and do it every day at the highest level you can. Like have high output, consistently doing the job, so that at any point here, a little lucky break can come and you're always doing the stuff. Like I'm always making the stuff. So there's stuff. And it's not like I need to build, I need to make the album that will change the world. And I really hope the lucky break is timed super well around when I release it. Not going to happen. Right. So you're doing the stuff all the time and you get some lucky breaks here and there. And every now and then you get a big lucky break. Right. So the drum off is kind of an okay example in that I was head down practicing 4 hours a day for years. And the drum off comes along. And I just kept practicing the same stuff, but formed it into a 5-minute solo and could go play the solo. Right? So it wasn't like I'm waiting for the moment to come. The big break has to come. You just got to the wheels got to keep turning.
Mm-hmm.
And band wise too. I mean, to your point about different types of fans, right? This is something I've marveled at with my own band. I've been hired to do some bigger gigs, but I've never fully cracked the code of like bringing a band to fruition as a successful touring act or something you could live off. Nowhere near. But my band, Childish Japes, is currently the most successful version of that I've ever been a part of. But it's really interesting to look on the back end at streams and look up like bands I look up to, musicians I look up to, and be like, wow, my band has way more streams than those people. And for a second, you're like, wow, we're cool. And then you realize, but hold on, that person sells out clubs in New York, and we can't bring, 24 people out to a show. So it's really interesting that there's these bands that like aren't really even on the map, but they book a show or they book a tour and fill venues. And then there's bands that have a whole bunch of streams, but they're sort of like very thinly dispersed around the world. And you might have some very real fans. I mean, the Japes have some very real fans, but it's just a different thing. It's just a different thing. And part of it, I suppose, could be generational, the way that different people consume music, but I think it's more than that. It's just different. And I don't quite know how to distill it down, but it's tough. You can't focus too much on the numbers. Again, it all comes back to like, are you showing up to work to do the thing? And I think when I think about running the website, which is, my bread and butter for over 10 years now, and especially lately, I like 90 is like, yes, I'm putting content out, but what no one sees is 95%, 98% of the time when the camera's not on, and I'm doing all the other stuff, right? I just show up to my office here every single weekday from like 8:30 until 2. And I do whatever work needs to be done. And there's never enough time to do all the work. But when an opportunity comes, and again, this is a perfect example of what we're talking about. This year, since I relaunched the website and it's much better and different, I'm trying to, and because I went to school for 3 years and have been totally off the map during COVID. So I'm like back now. And so this year, I'm reaching out to all sorts of people that I've done work with before and being like, hey, like drum channel, hey, Drumeo, like I've got all sorts of stuff going on. Do you want to do a thing? We've done a thing before. Why don't I come out and teach some stuff or whatever? So just putting the feelers out majorly and hoping to receive an opportunity for a lucky break, right? So like, somewhere like Drumeo or these other channels, they have a much bigger reach than me. And more importantly, they're people who just don't follow me already, even if they have a small reach. It's like, okay, you're just not one of my fans already. But the whole time I'm making content. Every week there's a lesson on my website. I'm playing gigs around town. I'm making as much content as I possibly can and leaving this much time to still practice and get good at the drums. And, if whatever comes along and totally pops off, I'll do extra prep for it, but it's just fitting into the job that I already do. You know what I mean?
I totally resonates. Yeah, man. It's funny you brought up practice because, obviously I'm here, but the more you explain what you're doing, it's like, oh yeah, that's exactly how, so I have 2 questions actually. So are your students primarily the subscribing students, or are you teaching private lessons?
I teach very few private lessons, usually 2 to 5 on Sundays. The vast majority of my students are online.
Okay.
They study with an asynchronous version of me. So the courses are all there, hundreds of lessons. You're studying with me, but it's pre-recorded.
Yeah. Yep. Great. Yep. And it's such a good way to reach way more people. And I think that's, I think a lot of musicians are taking that turn, or that pivot. The other thing is practice. So I often get the question of like, well, what's your practice routine? How much do you practice? And I'm like, I always say I am working too much to practice. I have a normal practice regimen or whatever. And but there's a part of me as like educator where I'm like I hate that's my answer, but like if I wanted to practice like I used to practice, I mean, I would have probably no life. I mean, I'd literally have to just, because for me, a good practice session, is a few hours. And if I could do that every day, that'd be great. But for me, it's like, I'm lucky if I get to sit down for an hour and go over some stuff. So I don't know how that is for you, being a working musician, and you're gigging a lot and teaching, and having to run your website. So what are your opinions on that? And for me, it's like, I kind of want to say, well, I am working. So I'm a working musician.
Right.
The practice part of my life has really happened already. And I do want to practice more, a lot, but it's just, the work becomes the practice, I guess.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The practice stuff, well, actually, I want to drop a note about the online. I was talking to someone about an old Berkeley peer, reached out after 10 years, I haven't seen him since Berkeley, and asked, he wants to start an online bass website kind of like mine, and was just getting advice. And I want to drop the same advice here because I think it's really useful. If you are showing up to work and doing your thing and creating content every day, then you're probably also thinking about like, having that annoying thought of like, I should also post on Instagram every day. I should also put a YouTube video up once a week. Whatever version of that you are following, and however you cope with the soul-crushing nature of social media, if you are creating content regularly, just because you have that feeling like you should and everyone's doing it, re-strategize a little bit and go, okay, I'm going to have to create content regardless. So let me create content that is related to itself for a few weeks at a time. And let me sort of by accident create a small course of stuff. I follow some guy who's coming to mind really recently that's a guitar player, who was like deconstructing a Tony Williams bride pattern and applying it to jazz soloing on the guitar. I was like, this is very cool. And in my mind, I was like, if he did 8 of these with different drummers, he'd have a course called, extracting guitar licks from the great jazz drummers. Right? Then you have an item of real value that you can market. No one cares about a single lesson, let alone a 60-second clip of you teaching something. But as soon as you have 8 or 10 or however many relevant, related lessons in one thing, now you have a product you can actually talk about. And if you do that by accident, right, you're doing that every week for a year, and you sort of put a little thought in advance, like what am I going to focus on? It could be anything in the beginning. Just jump in and see what happens. At the end of the year, you might have a handful now of little courses that you can sell or market to people, or even to your students that you teach privately. You can be like, hey, I'm curious if this works. Do this course. It's here. It's free. And then, still come see me and let's work through it. And let me just sort of guinea pig this on you. It's great content anyways. That's why I made it. So now you have a product, and this is the beginning of building a little like drum library or lesson library, lesson school, lesson whatever. And then you have something you can give a name to and start selling, So I was accidentally fortunate that my business model from the beginning was a lesson every Saturday. And there were years where I didn't really want to do that lesson, but I had to keep showing up and doing the lesson. And I really cut my teeth with teaching, deconstructing ideas, whatever it might be, and also the production value, the production side of it stuff in a very simple way. That like before I knew it, there were 500 lessons on my website. And I was like, okay, like even if they're poorly organized and like the camera's not that nice, this is worth $20 a month for subscribers. So there would be dozens in the beginning of subscribers that also felt that. And I had sort of created it without needing to do the like, okay, now I need to set 3 months aside and film all the courses ever. You're never going to have time to do that. So just do it along the way. Anyways, let's talk about practice. You just asked some great questions. I feel you 100% on there's like a weird catch-22 in this age of music where there's so much admin that is created when you have any job other than just going to gigs and playing. Like I have some friends in the city that they just go play gigs, 9 gigs a week. That's what they do. They have to answer a lot of texts and they're in a lot of group threads and keep their calendar really organized. but most of their time's most of their time is sitting around waiting for the gig or hanging out after the gig. But a huge proportion of their time, relatively speaking, is spent playing their instrument on stage. And that's really cool, but that's not what most of us do. And that's not what most people who don't live in big music cities do, which is almost everyone. So I'm in the same boat. That the catch-22 that I was about to describe is that like you get good at the thing. And because you're good at the thing, you can build all the stuff around the thing. And then all the stuff takes so much maintenance that you no longer practice the thing. And you can see it just sort of crumbling from the inside that like, okay, I have to be good at the drums to do literally every other part of my career. But the other parts of my career take so much time that I can't stay good at the drums. Of course, like you said, and I think this is really kind of interesting and a very small amount of tragic, that like really by the time you're 25, you do have, most people have most of the skills they're going to have. And it might be a time thing. I find that convincing. But I also think there is a spirit when you're young that is just different. Like the thoughts I had as a 15-year-old sitting at the drums, the energy I had to bring to the instrument, I just don't have anymore. And my thoughts are different, right? And my priorities are different. And I want more comfort in my life. And I'm just becoming old very quickly. And at that point, I was like, I will sit and practice the drums for 4 hours and not think about it. And now, like 45 minutes in, I'm like, oh, I need to stretch. And wow, I don't know what's going on with emails or whatever. Yeah. So there's a time where that is really happens more easily. Of course, countless exceptions to what I'm saying. People keep getting great at their instruments, pick up new instruments and stuff later in life. But there's also just like all the adult stuff that comes in post-college, right? That you just can't even possibly imagine when you're younger. I don't even know what they are, but like I'll be like, what was I doing yesterday? It's like, I don't know, like cleaning the grill. And I was like, this is 20 minutes that I never would have needed to spend 10 years ago. Right? Then multiply that by 15 other things you'd have to do in a day, and then have a kid, and it gets very funky. But so I'm on and off good with this. The beginning of this year, I was really great with it. But since we did have a kid recently, which is a totally different subject, I've really defined my work hours in the morning. And if I'm doing a good job with my self-discipline, I come and I practice for an hour before I think about anything. Can't give myself a chance to open that box and see all the tasks and emails and ideas and whatever that are waiting for me. Sit down and practice, get the most important thing done first, and then I feel good about my day. And it's like people say this about working out, meditating, so many other things. If I do that, honestly, I feel pretty good the rest of the day. Like things could be going to hell. I'm like, I did the thing that feeds all the other things and that feeds my soul. I still really love doing this. And it has the same effect as meditating or working out in a way. But that said, I don't always follow through with it, but it's good to at least define how you function best. I know that doing it first thing in the morning is best for me. And then the other thing that gets me in the practice room is having things to prepare for. So you can sort of strategize here and be like, wow, if you're really sort of distressed about, if one we're really distressed about how hard it is to make time to practice, you might like book yourself a thing in a couple months, book a gig with the band or whatever, even just like a 2-drummer jam or something with a friend, something that where you really kind of like want to be on your game, or resolve to go to the blues jam next week, and that'll light a little bit of fire, So like, again, I have a little bit of flexibility in my schedule, which is dangerous because like I can choose not to practice, but I have a couple things now on the calendar, just booked them in August. That's only 2 months away, and I really want to be good at the drums by then. I want to be like firing on all cylinders. So I can already feel the urgency increasing for that, and I know I'm going to put more time in. And you know what's crazy? It's at Drumeo. I'm just going to Drumeo to film some educational stuff. And I was just thinking yesterday, I don't think we're planning on me like playing a solo or anything. Like it's actually kind of like easy for me as a drummer. I can just go do the teaching. However, I was thinking I might ask if we can plan on filming a solo too. And really, it's because that will light a fire and get me really excited about developing some of these ideas that are floating around in my head that I would love to sort of bring to the next level of effortlessness, but that I am just having trouble prioritizing right now. So again, it's this strategizing of like, let me put something out there that forces me, that incentivizes my practice a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. And as you're talking too, there's other things that come to mind of like the projects that you work on become the practice in a way. So like if you were to make a specific lesson on a specific topic, there are things you're like, oh, but I want to present it this way. And I haven't really done it like this, but this is a good idea. I could do that. I mean, on the drums or on the guitar, I think that sometimes too, like if I'm trying to teach a specific concept, there'll be licks or ideas that pop up during the preparation. I'm like, oh yeah, that's actually a good one to add in there. It becomes a practice, a way of practicing itself. I wonder, the thing I've been seeing at Drumeo recently is they just throw a random song at you and they're like, hey, try to learn this song you've never heard. Have you been seeing those?
I think I will fall victim to that as well.
I was going to say, so I wonder what the hell that would be.
Yeah, it's honestly a pretty easy game for me. Again, I've managed to live under a rock most of my life. I don't know the classics of any genre.
Okay. There you go. Yeah, I've been seeing those. Those are entertaining. One thing I wanted to ask you about, and I got about 20 minutes here. And maybe I'm wrong. I thought I had heard at some point that speaking of gigging and all these different things and opportunities, did you end up subbing for Periphery at some point? Is that a rumor that I heard? Okay.
Yeah, that happened.
Okay. And did you do a whole tour? Was it a couple gigs?
It was initially supposed to be just one gig, and then it turned into a few more gigs. Kind of came and went, and I think over the course of probably a couple weeks, or maybe 5 to 7 gigs. This was like 5 or 6 years ago, so the details are a little hazy. But yes, that happened. It was very last minute. But the drummer is a friend of mine, whom I just saw to film a guest course for my website.
Nice,
Matt Halpern.
Nice.
Stay tuned.
Nice.
But yeah, he had a really challenging thing happen with family, and asked if I could just jump in. So we had like a 4-day turnaround time, and it was like, okay, utilize all that jazz big band knowledge, writing out and reading charts to learn Periphery songs very quickly. But anyways,
that's such a like opposite ends of the spectrum as far as music. How was that? So I know I've seen you do a lot of different stuff. So was the metal thing something you're like, oh, I've done this before? Or were you like, have you had experience with that type of music in the past? Or is that something that was new? Or how did you go about like learning that stuff?
Kind of is the answer to everything that you just asked. I've always been a jack of all trades. I would say maybe to a fault. At the moment, I'm feeling like I'm benefiting from that, but there's been a mix of, I like different stuff. I was never very tunnel visioned on any genre at any point. In drumming wise, it also felt that way too. So like, I went from my Red Hot Chili Peppers phase to my Blink-182 phase to my probably a punk pop emo phase, and then Dream Theater. So this is where double bass comes in. So I was a huge Dream Theater fan in like, I guess high school at some point, alongside other unrelated groups. But basically double bass was always just kind of like sporadically a part of what I was doing, right? So my first like prog rock trio when I was an early teenager, like we busted out some double bass every now and then, if I remember correctly. And then would work on it sporadically and was in like a progressive jazz metal trio with Felix Martin. If you've you would have heard of him. Yeah,
I know Felix.
The 14-string what's it called? Chapman stick, something like that. Anyways,
he's got his own. Does he have his own brand now, or is that?
I wouldn't be surprised. Again, under a rock, but he was always destined to do some things with that.
Yeah, I know
some
who
cool
he is,
stuff. So we went to Berkeley together, and we played stuff. So anyways, on and off, double bass stuff was always happening. I'm trying to think. I must be forgetting like the biggest time. There's a part of me that's like, when and why did I learn that? And I honestly can't quite give you a clear answer on it. But that was my spirit as a young drummer. Was like, I wasn't even thinking in genres. I was just like, double bass is a thing I could work on and I could learn. So that, same reason I was doing a 7/8 clave with nowhere to apply it musically ever, and spent months working on that to do the drum off and then be like, cool, I'll never play that again. So again, very different mentality at 20 years old. But yeah, so anyways, I had done a lot of double bass stuff on and off, but one of the takeaways though, when I'm joking about the big band stuff is like, you never know where things are going to pay off somewhere else, right? So I've had to do a couple gigs. For Generation X, it happened in the same way, where like the drummer was starting to have like wrist problems. That's with Steve Vai and Zach Wilde and a bunch of guitar shredders. And they called and they're like, can you fly out in 2 days and sub for one of the groups of the 5? It's like a G5. It's like G3, it's like G5. And I was like, sure, learn the stuff fast. And then very quickly, it became clear that like, okay, you're going to have to slowly take over the whole show.
The whole, like, so, like as in like all 5?
Yeah. So they started doing there's one band. All 5
okay.
G3 used to be different bands, right?
I believe so. I thought so.
Yeah.
But there's now, this was one. Okay. Now one band. Yeah.
One band.
So
5 guitarists, 3.5-hour show. So much hitting hard.
What guitar players were on that? Was that?
That's Steve Vai, Zach Wilde, Yngwie Malmsteen, Nuno Betancourt from the band Extreme, and Tosin Abazi from Animals as Leaders.
Yeah.
And really, they just called me because interesting generational shift here. Animals as Leaders is sort of guys my age doing, and then everyone else on the tour is a solid generation above me, 50s and 60s. In their 50s and 60s, not from the 50s and 60s. But so the older cats, they know tons of drummers who can play their music, but generationally the Animals as Leader stuff is different. It's just a different approach that to me comes very naturally, whereas the like sort of classic rock stuff, I find sort of counterintuitive. I'm not very good at playing it convincingly. So really the only reason I got that call is because Animals as Leaders music was involved in the show. Otherwise, there's no way I would have been a reasonable candidate for that. And I think the drummer Garska knew I could learn music really fast, right? He lived across from me at Berkeley. So he would have known that I could chart stuff out, understand the rhythms, get to the bottom of it pretty quick. If I needed to take notes, which I did, read my notebook off my moleskin, off my floor tom for the first several shows, and could make it happen in that way. But the Berkeley Connect, I feel like we're tying a lot of threads together here from our conversation. The Berkeley Connect, the jazz big band stuff randomly paying off later in life, and just understanding music better. And then just feeding curiosity, right? Suddenly I'm playing double bass and I'm okay at it. And yeah, I don't know what else, but yeah, anyways, that's how I ended up with Periphery. Doing that type of stuff and charting it out.
Yeah. Which one was first? Periphery or the
Periphery was first.
Okay.
I think it was first.
Yeah. Was the X one that was pre-COVID, or is that recent?
Actually, no. Gen X was first. Gen X was definitely first. I had short hair.
Okay.
And then Periphery. And
which one was more challenging?
Very different gigs, I'd say. I don't know. Again, interesting bit of thoughts on intuition here. My drumming intuition is aligned with Animals as Leaders and Periphery a lot more. So when I play those parts, they come out naturally. Right? If I can figure out what the kick drum pattern is here, and I know that it's a halftime backbeat, my body will do it. And the fills that I'll play will make sense. They'll be kind of like what Halpern is playing. The rock guys, the real rock guys, I never went through the classic rock phase. My parents didn't listen to classic rock. I never listened to Led Zeppelin until I was like out of college. I was like, I guess I should check them out. So those parts that, like, again, like intuitively, they're not like technically more challenging, but I couldn't play them in a compelling way, I don't think. And that includes just like the volume, the tone, and all that stuff. And I don't have, and like my natural cymbal setup, for example, isn't that type of thing either. So it was a really cool learning experience. And it actually made me understand rock and roll for the first time. Like with Zach Wilde, we would just play Black Sabbath songs, like as a rock trio, with no monitors. Right? He just sings into the house. He's the ultimate rock star, and I was like, this fucking rocks. Like, this is awesome, right? Because I always struggled with the production quality of the old recordings, just like as a dumb child of whatever I was born. It's just like I couldn't get past it as a young listener.
Yeah.
When we do it live, dude, it hits super hard. The subs are cranking, like none of that all gets left behind. It's just big, loud rock. And I was like, this is actually pretty awesome. So I've had to just, I was trying to hone my intuition during that of like play the right types of fills, right? I think of playing this like weird ghost notey complex fill, or not complex, just like not right. And what I need to go is like or whatever, you know? So yeah, learning experience in that regard. And then like playing with Yngwie Malmsteen, dude. I mean, it literally can't get more different. This is where I do smile when I think back to, I remember explicitly having this thought in college when I had shaved myself a mohawk. Partially because a girl I liked was like, I think you'd look good with a mohawk. I was like, okay. But that went well for a while. But anyways, I loved the idea at the time of being a guy with a mohawk that's actually mostly into like jazz fusion. And I loved the idea of playing a lot of different genres and having two people meet. This is my 19-year-old self going like, what if two people met, dude? And like one of them had seen me with like Felix playing metal and another at a jazz club, and they're like, no, it can't be the same guy, right? And like, that would be cool. And that was kind of a goal I had as far as my diversity went. And it is kind of funny to think back and be like playing with Yngwie Malmsteen of all people going like you couldn't get more like satanic metal, at least from his era. And then like rolling down the street here to a jazz club to play like as quietly as humanly possible and try to imitate Elvin Jones.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun.
There's a lot of takeaway from that. Because the question I typically ask a lot of the guests who are specifically kind of more gigging musicians is always, what is their take on picking a lane and really becoming very, very good at that, or trying to be well-rounded and wear many hats? And I know I have my opinions, but it sounds like you're more down the try to be well-rounded. But
I don't know, though. I would say it's not good strategy, to be honest. It's like half indecisiveness and half genuine open-mindedness, sure. But that appears in every aspect of my life. So my band Childish Japes is the same idea. It's like, we're going to make this a sandbox where we can do anything. So we did like a rock album, and then we literally did an instrumental jazz, contemporary jazz album. Now we're doing like a soul album. Extremely hard to market a band where every product is completely unrelated to the last. There is a through line sound, I believe, but not easy. And honestly, when I think of people in my scene who are gigging a lot, it is kind of, it's like you want to have a thing, but that thing be versatile. So like someone that comes to mind is a great drummer named Jordan Rose, who went to Berkeley with me and who's playing right now with like some really awesome artists. I saw him with Theo Katzman the other day, he was playing with my friend, was on keys. And he played with like some of the guys in Wolfpack, right? Big gigs. And he's like the groove guy. And he's always been the groove guy. And that's like his thing. And that's presumably, I don't know him that well, just where his heart's at. Like that's where he feels like authentically interested in the drums. But he can do a lot of different types of gigs. It's not genre exclusive. It's just that you'll associate him with like committing to like groove principles above all else and not necessarily needing to get flashy. And when you think of someone, you could name any of many, many, many drummers that are super crazy, impressive, and flashy, they do a different thing, right? Or like Chris Dave, maybe that's a good example. Chris Dave has a thing, but he can get called to play on the Adele album. And when you learn that it's Chris Dave on that Adele album, you listen, you're like, God damn, it does actually sound like Chris Dave. Like this, it is interesting. I can hear that it's him, even though it's not any of the like standard Chris Dave stuff. You know what I mean? So I actually think it's just, again, it's my personality. It's just how I've always been. It's not a decision at all. But my sort of super widely spread diversity, I don't think helps me, to be honest, because I'm not that guy. If anything, I'm the online educator guy now that specializes in improvisation. So that's the only niche that I can confidently say that is probably associated with me. But on the music side, pretty hard to say. And I think that's to my disadvantage. But it is also just what it is. I'm not going to pretend to carve out a niche that doesn't exist for me.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I've had this. I've had similar thoughts, and recently have been trying to go all right, like hone in one of these things musically. Maybe you need to hone in one of these, because for the longest time, when I was posting content earlier in the game, it would be like, here's a fusion lick, and then it'd be like, here's a blues lick, and it'd be like, here's a metal riff, and then it'd be like, here's a jazz line, here's how to play over a 2-5-1, and it was just like the background of that, and then over time I was like, God, this just seems to be. I thought this was how I should be as a musician, more well-rounded. Seems to not be really working. So that's actually been something I've been thinking about a lot over the last few years, is like honing in something, at least like just kind of maybe just, but the hard part with that is like, I look at it and I'm like, well, I don't want to be the rock guy, or, you know what I mean? Or like whatever. Yeah. And so I want to do these other things, and that's becomes a struggle of being interested in the other things and
totally.
Try not to pigeonhole yourself.
I do think it's useful to define what is a business endeavor versus a personal endeavor. Yeah. Because I have found, as I've been more explicit about my niche for teaching, my website has flourished more. And it's flourished for several reasons recently, but one of them is that it's really clear what you're getting into. Right? So I teach improvisation and creativity on the drums, and no one else online does that. And I did not say that before. I had the double bass course. I had the jazz course. I was literally me, but in website form. Really hard to market. Really kind of not a great business model. However, like within, like I was saying about the session musicians, like within improv, I can talk about other genres, but the niche remains. And that's really way easier to understand as a student or a consumer, if you want to think of it that way. But then, on the personal side, I would never like change the stuff I practice or the gigs I seek out because I need to like fit some imagined box. You know what I mean? You might, again, thinking about the business side, if I wanted to get, let's say I didn't have my website and I was like, I need gigs, specifically gigs that take me out on tour and pay a lot of money. So not weird avant-garde jazz stuff in the city. I might see my social media as a business card and be like, cool. What I actually do, it's for me, and I'm going to keep doing it, but I am going to put out the type of stuff that I'm trying to attract, right? So the types of gigs that I want to be a part of, I'm going to play that type of music and put that foot forward on social media, seeing it as business. And again, it's like, it's much easier in your mind to make that move and not feel like you're sacrificing anything important, because like you're seeing it as a business and you're going like, well, I got to pay the bills, and this is me strategizing as a businessman, as opposed to me like selling a part of my soul and pretending to like a genre that I'm not into. Of course, there's limits. You want to obviously like, if you don't want to do that if you hate the genre. It's like, I'm not gonna if I hate country music, I'm not gonna start putting out like begging for country tours.
Yeah.
So there's some wiggle room, but I think it's a useful idea.
And it is really useful, actually, because I mean, there are many legends out there that I feel like, but whether by choice or just by happenstance, have sort of done that. They are always on the same types of gigs, but then when you know their background, they're virtuosic, like guys who can do anything. I think, or you see them do other things that aren't the big gigs. Like, I think of like, I don't know if you're familiar with Brett Garsed, guitar player from Australia. So he does a lot of like big rock pop gigs. He's like John Farnham. Do you know who John Farnham is? Australian legend. Yeah. But so it's okay. So Brett does these really big kind of like almost pop / rock, but there's a huge underground of him doing like crazy fusion stuff. And it's really great. And I feel like there's probably a lot of drummers who are like that. Like I'm blanking of Vinny Caluta. I would
Vinny Caluta,
would put under that, because I've seen him do a lot of big, huge pop gigs, and then you see him, playing with Jeff Beck or whoever.
Right. He might be one of the only musicians who's famous specifically for doing everything, but he's an exception because he's like literally on another planet. And most people associate him, to your point, with like Sting.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I was just thinking of. And then, yes, you dig in and you're like, he played on a, like, what was the metal album he played on? Like, not Meshuggah. I don't know. Anyways. Yeah,
that'd be funny.
100%. And he'll be like at the club playing jazz stuff. And he's been on like whatever record you've never heard of that's totally unlike any of that stuff.
He's a legend. Well, cool, man. It's about time. I think we wrap it up here. I got an appointment in about 10 minutes, but yeah, man, I really appreciate you being on here. This was a great conversation. I'd love to have you again sometime.
Thanks, man. Yeah, so much to talk about. Thanks for making it easy. This was fun.
Yeah. So the last thing I'd like to ask is, since it is about making a life in music, what kind of, like, if you could narrow down a sort of overall advice into a sentence or two, or even a little paragraph to leave with other people about how to kind of do what you're doing or make some sort of career happen in music, what would that be?
Wow. Big question. So I'm going to throw some tidbits out there. I'll let you guys connect the dots, but hone your craft helps. Think strategically about stuff, right? Time is your most valuable asset. So if you're going to do stuff, have it be contributing to a thing that gets bigger that you can sell. And aside from that, creating a life in music. The other thing is, here's the other thing. It's your 20s to your 30s, right? Like I said earlier, the timeline is extended for musicians compared to traditional jobs. In your 20s and to your 30s, you're still really figuring stuff out. And in my experience, and I think it's the experience of a lot of people like me, at about 25, a traditional age like thing here, but about 25, you start getting really good at the thing that you've been doing. And then around 30, you start to really sound unique with the thing you've been doing. Right? So it's around 30 that people start to I look around and I go, wow, all these people I've known for a decade now, a lot of them are starting to get a really solid foothold. And why are they starting to get a really solid foothold? It's because they've amassed all this experience along the way. It takes time in the trenches, fighting the good fight, finding your voice, experimenting, failing, doing terrible gigs, meeting people on terrible gigs, to get through to a point where you have basically outlasted all the people who weren't going to hang around. The pool kind of gets a little smaller, and the only people left are people that are doing pretty serious things and are at least very serious about what they do. So it's really important to understand that there is a trajectory for this type of stuff that's not normal or traditional like other paths. Of course, it doesn't work for anyone. You can't just wait around until you're 30. You have to be really huffing it and really down in the trenches during that time. But that's something I could not have foreseen as a younger person. I don't know if it would have mattered to me, but it's something I have seen pretty consistently in recent years, as I'm 32 and people have really started to, I look around and I'm like, wow, that guy that I've known, he just won a Tony Award for arranging this musical. Oh, this guy, oh, he's on tour with who? Crazy. His first big gig? Wow, that's so cool. I just saw him at a little club playing with nobody the other day. Yeah. So everything starts to click a little more, and the only people left are people that have amassed the time and experience to sort of sound unique and be good at what they do.
Great. And so last bit, promotional stuff. So you got your website and your band. You can shout those out again so people know exactly what to look for.
Yeah, jpbouvetmethod.com is my website. I teach improvisation and creativity on the drums with systematic step-by-step approaches. And it really works. Most people, they see improvisation as something that's like, like very sort of spooky and you either have it or you don't. I promise that is not the case. You can teach it, and hundreds of drummers have gotten good at improvising on the kit freely and relatively effortlessly with these relatively simple approaches. So there's that. And hell, dude, let's do a freaking promo code, man. What do you want it to be?
That's a good freaking question.
Should it be just your last name?
Probably my last name, Salo, S-A-L-O-W, because creating a life in music is a very long.
That's a long promo code. Salo, S-A-L-O-W. That's a promo code. If you're listening to this, go get a free month. Just put the code in at the checkout screen. Cool. So that's that. My band's called Childish Japes. I think we're cool. And I don't know, other than that, if you're in New York City, maybe you catch a gig, hit me up for a lesson. That's it, man.
Cool, man. All right, dude. Appreciate you having you on. And until next time, man, have a great week.
Sounds great, Mike. Thanks a ton.
All right, buddy. If you'd like to join my Patreon to get your questions answered by the guests, then you can go to patreon.com/Mike Salo. There are several tiers there that you can take part in, and lots of different perks like pre-recorded guitar lessons or even one-on-one guitar lessons with me. There are live masterclasses every week for certain tiers. And again, you can go to patreon.com/Mike Salo to check that out.